Hey, I'm starting a new series on Yocto. If you don't know about Yocto, Yocto is an amazing tool which you can use to make custom Linux distribution for your embedded devices. I've been using Yocto a lot at my work and I figured why not make a video series for this one. So this video is not a lot about Yocto, it's mainly for the setup because if you Yocto currently supports these many Linux distributions, so if you use any of these, you're good. But if you're like me who uses Arch or any other distribution which are not supported by Yocto, you are at a bad luck because I have tried building Yocto on my Arch system and let me tell you, it's a nightmare. I have spent a lot and a lot of time fixing all the issues, but still wouldn't build. So, what's the solution then? First solution is straightforward, using any of the supported distributions, but I kind of don't want to do that because I'm very comfortable in my Arch system. I've put in so much work and I don't want to jump onto some other Linux distribution just to do Yocto build. Then the second solution is getting a VM, a Ubuntu VM, and that is kind of the solution I have come up with, but not that straightforward. So I've kind of come up with this solution where you have your actual Arch system or any other distribution which you're using as a host system, and then the Ubuntu VM. Now, if you have used VM, you know that it's a completely isolated system and it's not a very good comfortable experience using a VM. I wanted the complete comfortability of using my actual working system and still being able to build the complete Yocto onto a Ubuntu VM. And this is how you do that. So all the Yocto directories and all the files and every single thing you're gonna do and all the editing, everything you will be doing onto your actual Arch system or the system you're using, only the build will be happening onto the Ubuntu server. But if you know anything about Yocto, building Yocto is a very process intensive work because you are building thousands of projects for thousands of packages from source. So it's gonna take up like 100 to 200 gigabytes of storage onto your system just to get up a very minimal Linux distribution running. So how do we do that? The actual Yocto directory and everything will be still be onto the host system itself, but I'll be taking that directory and I will be mounting it inside the Ubuntu server using a remote mounting system. Now you have a couple of them like SSHFS, NFS, Samba, or 9P. The one I found working the best is VirtIOFS. VirtIOFS gives you near native performance file mounting. Let's get started. First, we'll be downloading the Ubuntu server ISO file so you can create a Ubuntu VM. Now, one more thing, to create a Ubuntu VM, I'm not using any VMware or VirtualBox. I'm using QEMU to create the VM because QEMU gives you a lot of customizability. So first is get the Ubuntu server, download it. Okay, I've already downloaded it. So after that, we can get started doing the setup. Now I'll be following the blog I have created for this one. I'll link up the blog in my description. You can check it out over there. So let's do a split. And first of all, install the QEMU full package onto your system. So this is the, you can look it up for your distribution. For Arch, if you're using Arch, just run QEMU full and that's gonna install the QEMU onto your system. I've already downloaded it, so I guess I don't need to yeah, there is some updates for QEMU systems, but I'm just gonna ignore it for now. After you have downloaded the QEMU package, we need to create a directory for Yocto where we'll keep all of the Yocto stuff. So let's do mkdir and Yocto and let's get inside it. So now that you're inside the Yocto directory, we'll create a small image where we'll install the Ubuntu VM. So for that, we'll do qmu img create, and this is the command. So qmu create, and this is gonna be for the file format will be qcow2, and this will be the ubuntu disk image, and we are allocating 20 gigabytes for that image because that's more than enough to run ubuntu vm. Now you can give more or less, but we don't need more than 20, so just hit enter, and after that the ubuntu image will be created, and now we can get started installing ubuntu server onto the image. So to do that, this is the command you need to run. Now I'm just gonna paste it and I'll explain you what's happening here. So first of all, we are running QEMU system x86-64. This is gonna be the system, the VM running, and we are running it as x86-64 because that's the computer I'm having. Now, if I'm using this, I can enable KVM. Now look it up that your system has enabled KVM or not, because KVM stands for a kernel virtual machine. Now, if you enable KVM, the VM will be very performant. We are enabling KVM. The next argument is the M flag, where we specify the how much memory we are gonna allocate for the VM. Now on my system, I have 32 gigs of RAM. I'm allocating 16 for it. That's, I think, enough. Just adjust it according to your need. So 16 gigabytes for me. And now you have the SMP. Now SMP is how many cores you want to allocate for the VM. On my system, I have 12 cores. I'm allocating 10 of these for the VM. Now I will recommend you, if you're gonna use your system while the Yocto is building, just allocate like 1 or 2 cores less than what you have. So you're gonna have a spare 1 or 2 cores to do your other stuff. So that's 12, 10 for me. And then the CD-ROM. Now this is where you'll specify where the ISO is. So I'm just gonna go, and it's actually in my downloads directory, so I'll change it. And that is the image, Ubuntu 24 live server. Okay, so get that. Now the next image is gonna be the hard disk image, because this will be mounted as a disk with the file we created. And then after that we have boot D. This will be telling the QEMU to boot from this ISO file. And then here we are creating a new network interface. And then we are also initializing the VGA so we can have a display output. So this is going to create a VGA output, a VGA device. And then now we are starting the display for this one. Okay, so let's run it. And after that, the VM should get started with a small screen. And now here we'll install the Ubuntu system. All right, so it started. Now I think you must be familiar with how to install a Linux system. So I'm just gonna quickly skip over it. So English, now done. Now I want to install Ubuntu server. Yes, done. And I was gonna initialize the network. Okay. And I don't want any proxy. I don't want to test any mirrors also. So I'm just gonna cancel it. I'm just gonna continue. Now use the entire disk. Yes, I don't want to encrypt with looks or anything. So just simply done, and done again, and continue. Now here you'll give it the username for the VM. So I'm just gonna give mine like Anurag. The host name for the VM will be VM. I'm just gonna keep VM as a host name, Anurag. And then here password. So I'm gonna keep it very simple and give it like 1234 as a password for the VM. So it's gonna be simple for me. And done, and continue. And here you can install the OpenSSH server. I would recommend you just do it here itself, so you don't have to do it later. And done. And we don't want to install any of these extra packages, so I guess just done. And now it's started installing the Ubuntu server. So now we just wait. All right, so the installation is done, and now we can just go and reboot the system. So we'll click on reboot, and it's going to start rebooting. Now we don't really have to wait for the reboot. We'll have to close it. So just click somewhere outside, go back to the terminal where you started the QEMU server, and just terminate it by giving it a signal. So we'll do Control C, and then we stop the VM. Now that the Ubuntu is installed onto the image, we can boot it up. So how about we boot it up? To boot up, we'll use this command, and now you'll see something here that we're not passing the bootd argument, and also the hard disk, not the hard disk, the CD-ROM image, because we don't have to. We just need to give the hard disk, and it's gonna boot up from here. All right, so let's try it, and let's hit enter. Now if you do that, it should boot up Ubuntu. And great, we got the VM, that was my host name, and we got a login prompt. Now I'll just give in my username. So Anurag, that's what I gave for the username, and the password I gave it 1234. And now we are in. So our VM does work. Okay, great. Now here we don't have anything yet, so we'll create a directory for Yocto, and we'll get inside Yocto. We don't have anything, so our VM is ready. Now we can quit out of the VM, and now the next thing we want to set up is SSH, because that is a small Ubuntu screen. We cannot interact efficiently with it. We cannot copy and paste. We cannot do a lot of stuff onto there, because now that we have SSH, we can quickly just spin up a new terminal and we can SSH inside the VM, and that's going to be way more comfortable. To do that, okay, here I've added the instruction to set up SSH, but we don't have to do it anymore because that happened in the installation process. Okay, and now we need to run this QEMU command to run. Now you'll see something interesting. It's almost identical to this guy. It's almost identical till here, but here I've added two more arguments. So this is net device and a new device. So here what I'm telling it, hey, now how are we gonna be able to SSH into our VM? Now to do that, there are multiple ways of doing that. So setting up a bridge network, setting up a turn tap network, I have tried all of them, but this is the simplest one you can use. So what you do is you just take runs on port number 22. So you take that port number 22 of your VM, and then you forward it to your host at port number this. So when you can just SSH into your local host, and if you just give this as a port, you will be SSHing inside the VM. That's how it works. So you're just setting up a host forward port. So now just hit enter and let Ubuntu boot. And now we got to the login prompt. I'm not gonna log in from here. I'm just gonna leave it. Okay, we'll just open up a new terminal. Okay, now from this new terminal, we can SSH inside. So type SSH and the username you have picked for the VM, @localhost. Now if you do this, you'll be SSHing inside your actual system, your own localhost system. But if you give it the this port, this is the forwarded port. So now if you try to SSH into this port is actually forwarded from your VM. So you will be actually SSHing inside the VM. So I'll give it a yes. And the password I've used is 1234. And now we are inside the VM. So the VM setup is done. We got SSH working, we got network working. That's good. All right. Now the next task is going to be setting up the shared directory. Then how it's going to work is we will be having the directory on my local host on the host system, and this will be get mounted inside the VM at the Yocto directory. Now this is what we want to set up now. So we'll close out of this terminal and we'll stop our VM. Okay. Now that VM is stopped, your next task is going to be setting up Vert IO FSD. Now this is going to be interesting because first of all, Vert IO FSD get installed when you install the QEMU full package. All right. The problem is this Word.io FSD is not really inside the path. It's not there in any of the general path like slash bin slash user bin and any of those. It's actually available at user lib Word.io FSD. I don't know why. It's it's the same thing with other distributions also. It's at some very weird path. So that you have to look it up for your distribution. For Arch, it's actually here. And then here you will be specifying it's going to create a socket. Now this socket will be used uh, by this VortIOFS daemon and the QMU. So they both will be using this socket to communicate to each other. And then here you will be specifying what path, what is the directory you want to share. But there is another problem, the UID and GID of your user. So on a VM, if you don't know about UID and GID, all the users on a Linux distribution, on a Linux system, has a UID and GID. UID is your user ID and GID is a group ID. Whenever you create, the ownership of a file is actually stored by these IDs. On a VM, on the VM, we have only one user right now. So on a Linux system, all the normal user ID and GID starts at 1000. So on a VM, we have only one user, and that's going to have a UID and GID as 1000. But on your host system, if you have more than one user, it's likely that the UID and GID might be more than 1000. It could be 1001, 1002, 1003. So, and that's going to cause a problem when you're mounting the folder, because if you mount the folder on your computer, the folds and files in the folder will be created by you will be for your user ID. Let's assume 1002. But if you mount it onto your VM, that's going to show up as 1002, and that VM user will not be having access to that directory. That's going to be a whole mess of permission issues. So just check it. Okay, on your host system, just run ID and see. If you run ID on your host system and if you get 1000, you're fine. Okay, you're good to go. So you could just run this and start your Word.io daemon. But if this does not show up as 1000, if it's more than 1000, then you will have to run this guy. Okay, now in this, you just have to specify the user ID and the group ID which you have here. All right, so this will be go here and this will go here. Okay, now what this is doing is actually mapping. So it's gonna map your user ID and group ID to 1000 into your VM. So do that. All right, in my case it's 1000, so I could just directly go with this guy. If it's not 1000, use this one. All right, so now here I'll be having to run two different shells. So I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna paste it. So I'll probably do a horizontal split. So I have two terminals now. Okay, on this terminal, I'll be running this VortIOFS daemon. So now it has started. Okay, if you can see, it's waiting for a host to connect. And now for the VM, you will be running this guy. And I know it's a long command, but let's paste it. Now here, you'll have to be a little bit very careful that the memory you have used, 16 gigabytes, should match here in this line. Okay, these should match. If they don't match, you're gonna get an error saying like this. All right, so do that. Now describing all of this, honestly, I don't really understand all the flags which is using, so you can just research about this on your own. But basically you have to run this, and then you'll be specifying the socket used for communication. So the socket is this guy. So we're creating a new socket at temporary VM shared socket. So let's do that and let's run, and this is gonna start our VM. So the VM is started. Okay. And let's go back to another terminal and let's SSH inside the VM. All right. Okay, now this is the VM. And now one more thing, you can just do a distinguish between my host system and the VM running bash, and my host system is running ZSH. So this is VM. Now inside the VM, if you go inside the Yocto directory, remember we created a Yocto directory, it does not have anything. All right. But now let's mount it. So to mount this thing, to mount the shared directory which you have created here onto your VM, you will have to run this on to your VM. So we are mounting, the type is going to be vert IOFS, and the mount block device which we are using is myFS, and the directory we want to use is Yocto. Okay, so let's hit enter and give it the password of the VM, and done. Okay, now if you go inside the Yocto directory, you will be finding that the qcov file which you created in the host system. And that's pretty much done.